He took me to his basement on our first date. I barely got out. I still don't know why I'm posting this here, but I can't stop replaying that night in my head. Maybe typing it out will help me finally sleep without waking up in a cold sweat. So here goes. My name is Sarah. I'm 26, freshly out of a messy breakup. And until recently, I thought my biggest problem was figuring out if I could handle living alone. Turns out, I had bigger issues ahead of me. It began like this. 3 weeks ago, I matched with a guy named Travis on a dating app. His profile looked normal. He smiled alongside his dog, liked hiking, had some pictures of traveling. We chatted for a few days, and he seemed charming, witty, and, well, safe. I've never been great at picking up red flags, but there was nothing obviously strange about him. He asked me about my favorite places to visit, the foods I couldn't live without. I joked that I'd kill for a caramel latte and some good fries any day of the week. He laughed and said something about how you can judge a person by their favorite comfort foods, all pretty innocent. He suggested meeting up for a casual coffee on a Sunday afternoon. I said yes. Sunday was perfect. It gave me time to mentally prep. The day came, and I remember feeling oddly nervous. I chalked it up to the first date jitters. I put on a blouse I liked, did my hair in loose waves, and told myself there was no reason to freak out. Maybe I'd make a new friend, or who knows, spark some real chemistry. The coffee shop was only a few blocks away, so I walked, letting the late afternoon sun calm me down. He was already there, leaning against a brick wall outside the cafe, wearing a black jacket and a friendly grin. When he saw me, he pushed away from the wall and waved. The first thing I noticed was how tall he was, at least 6 feet. And the second thing was that he had these warm gray eyes that crinkled when he smiled. For a split second, I had a good feeling, like maybe everything would turn out fine. He said, "Sarah?" and opened his arms as if we'd known each other for years. Not in a creepy way, more like a friendly invitation. I laughed and gave him a quick hug. Inside, we sat at a little table by the window. He commented on how he liked the eclectic vibe of the place, pointing out the mismatched couches and artwork on the walls. We ordered cappuccinos. The conversation flowed easily, though it was mostly just casual get-to-know-you stuff. He asked me about my job at a local nonprofit, and I told him I enjoyed it, but was hoping to move up to a project management role soon. He listened attentively, nodding. It felt refreshing that he seemed genuinely curious about me. I asked him about his own career, and he said he did contract work in home renovations. He described flipping houses, dealing with contractors, that sort of thing. I remember picturing him in a hard hat and smiling to myself. At some point, he mentioned this cool old house he was working on, just on the outskirts of town. Said it was a heritage property that belonged to a friend of his late grandfather. He spoke about it with real passion, how the architecture was old school, how there were hidden corners and a massive basement that served as a root cellar in the early 1900s. It was the first time I saw an excited spark in his eyes. I teased him that he was definitely a house nerd, and he gave me a playful grin. We lingered over our coffees until the sun started dipping low. I thought we'd say our goodbyes, maybe schedule a second date. But then he said, "Hey, I have to swing by that old place and lock up. I know it's random, but if you're interested, I could show you around. It's a bit of a drive, though. You up for it?" I hesitated. Going somewhere secluded on a first date is usually a big no for me. But he was so disarming, so confident, and my gut wasn't sounding any alarms. The coffee date had gone flawlessly. I told myself I was being paranoid if I said no. So I said, "Sure, I'd love to see it." He seemed genuinely happy about my answer. "Perfect," he said, standing up and offering me his hand. I felt a small thrill of excitement. In hindsight, I hate how naive I was, but that's how it happened. I followed him to his car, a gray SUV that looked well kept. He opened the passenger door for me and waited until I buckled up before getting in himself. He queued up some indie folk music, soft guitar strumming, that lulled me into a relaxed state. I didn't even think to text someone my location. That's the part that keeps me awake at night. The fact that I basically handed him an opportunity on a silver platter. We drove out of the city, chatting about nothing in particular. He told me about random renovation jobs he'd done, a few weird clients, a bizarre painting he found hidden behind a wall once. I laughed at his anecdotes. He drove calmly, never speeding, never doing anything to put me on edge. The sun sank lower, and soon we were on a quieter road flanked by tall trees. Eventually, we turned onto a narrow driveway surrounded by overgrown bushes. A sign, half fallen, read, "Lakeview Estate." But there was no lake in sight, just tangled vegetation. At the end of that driveway stood an old 2-story house with peeling paint and boarded-up windows on one side. My immediate impression was that it looked haunted. "Is this the place?" I asked, and he nodded, parking the SUV beside what appeared to be an abandoned fountain. I got out and surveyed the building. Weeds crunched underfoot, and the porch steps looked like they might give way under too much pressure. Travis took a flashlight from the back seat and said, "Watch your step, some of the floorboards are loose." With surprising confidence, He led me up to the front door, fiddled with a ring of keys, and unlocked it. I followed him into a foyer that smelled of dust and stale air. There was an old chandelier overhead, missing half its crystals. The walls had water stains. My heart began beating faster, but I told myself it was just the spookiness of the house. We walked through a few rooms on the main floor. An empty living room with a massive fireplace, a dining room with a long wooden table covered in a dusty sheet. Travis explained how the wiring had to be redone, how the floors needed reinforcement. Then he said, "Let me show you the basement. That's where the real history is." My stomach fluttered, an odd mix of curiosity and slight apprehension, but I followed him anyway, descending creaky wooden steps into a dimly lit space. The flashlight beam bounced off stone walls and low ceilings. The place did feel ancient, with a damp chill that made me hug my arms. At the bottom of the stairs was a hallway leading to several small rooms. "People used to store food here back in the day," Travis told me, shining the light around. "But there's one room that's bigger. I think it might have been used as a workshop or something." We walked a bit further, and he opened a door to a room that indeed was larger than the others. My eyes struggled to adjust, but I could see old shelves, random debris. Travis walked in first, scanning the area. I took a cautious step in, and that's when I heard the door slam shut behind me. In a flash, everything changed. I spun around, heart hammering. "Travis, what?" He flicked off the flashlight, plunging us into darkness. My pulse roared in my ears. "I'm sorry," he said, though he didn't sound sorry at all. "This isn't what you think it is." Panic rose like bile. I fumbled for the doorknob, but it wouldn't turn. I banged on the door, shouting, "Let me out! What are you doing?" My voice echoed off the cold walls. I felt him move closer behind me, and I instinctively lashed out, trying to push him away. His grip on my arm was like a vice, forcing me back. I screamed, struggling, but he was bigger, stronger, and he managed to pin me against the wall. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said calmly. The flashlight flicked back on, shining directly in my eyes, blinding me. I tried to twist away. My breathing was ragged, tears burning in my eyes. "Please, Travis, let me go," I gasped, but he just pressed me harder into the wall. I don't know how long I fought. It felt like ages. He finally wrestled me to the floor, my wrists pinned above my head. Despite my screams, he just muttered, "It's no use. Nobody can hear you out here." The calmness in his voice terrified me more than if he'd been ranting. I realized I was alone with a predator, locked in a basement with no one around. Even if I could break free for a second, I'd have to navigate a pitch-black house and locked doors. Something in me snapped. I started sobbing, fully convinced I might die right there on that cold floor. At some point, he hauled me up and shoved me into an old wooden chair in the corner. With one hand gripping my neck, he used his other to yank some rope from his jacket pocket. Rope, like he'd planned this all along. My stomach churned with nausea. I thrashed, trying to stop him, but he forced my arms behind the chair, tying them so tight I lost feeling in my fingers. My legs got bound to the chair legs, too. I couldn't move an inch. I pleaded with him. I don't remember exactly what I said. I was so hysterical, but it was something along the lines of, "Why are you doing this? Please, I have family. I have friends. They'll know I'm gone." He just knelt down to meet my eye level. The flashlight on the floor cast eerie shadows across his face. "They might notice you're missing," he said slowly, "but they won't find you here in time." At that, I broke. My mind spun with every worst-case scenario I'd ever imagined. Kidnapping, torture, unspeakable acts. I begged him not to hurt me, promised him anything, money, my car, whatever he wanted, if he'd just let me go. He smirked in a way that made my skin crawl. "I don't need your money. I want something else. I want to see how far a person can go when they think there's no way out." He left me there, tied up in the darkness. I heard him move around, maybe rummaging through shelves. Then he left the room. I sat in the pitch black, panting, tears drying on my cheeks. I fought against the rope, but it only dug deeper into my wrists. My shoulders screamed in pain. The air was cold enough that my teeth chattered. My head throbbed. Seconds stretched into minutes, or maybe hours. I prayed to any higher power that might be listening for a miracle. I resolved to fight or run the moment I got a chance, even if it meant risking everything. After a while, I heard footsteps overhead. The walls were thick, muffling most sounds, but the distinct creaking of floorboards told me he was moving around the house. My mind raced. Was he setting something up? Was he grabbing a weapon? My entire body trembled. Eventually, the footsteps came back down the stairs. I braced myself, struggling to keep calm. He opened the door and flashed the beam of light across my face again. "Still here," he said, amused. "You're stronger than I expected." I couldn't even muster a response. My mouth was too dry. He set down a plastic bottle of water on the floor, unscrewed the cap, and brought it to my lips. I resisted at first, but I was so dehydrated that when the water touched my mouth, I drank greedily. He let me have a few sips before pulling it away. "Why Why are you doing this? I managed to whisper, my voice hoarse. He exhaled, and for a moment he seemed lost in thought. Because people lie, he said. They pretend to be moral, caring, but it's all a facade. I want to peel that facade away. It's fascinating to watch someone stripped of all their pretenses. You're sick, I said, spitting the words out. My own voice sounded foreign to me, laced with a bitterness I'd never had before. He just shrugged. Maybe, but that doesn't change the situation. He spent the next hour or so pacing around, asking me questions. Like what I was most afraid of, if I'd ever truly been alone in life, how much pain I could endure. I tried to shut him out, but he was relentless. Eventually, I tried to use conversation as a distraction, in hopes he'd let his guard down. I asked him about his life, his family. He was tight-lipped at first, but eventually let slip that he'd grown up in this area, that his grandfather had indeed owned the property. He said his grandfather was a collector of secrets. I didn't even know what that meant. I got the sense he'd inherited some twisted worldview from the old man. Whenever I tried to steer the conversation toward letting me go, he'd just laugh coldly. My mind cycled through panic and numbness. I started analyzing the room for anything that could help me. The rope was thick, but maybe if I could loosen it over time. The chair felt old, possibly breakable, but I was tied so tightly that even shifting my weight took monumental effort. My wrists were raw, and I worried the circulation to my hands would be cut off. I realized I couldn't stay like this for long. If I did nothing, I'd either starve, freeze, or meet some gruesome fate at Travis's hands. I began slowly twisting my arms, wincing at the friction of the rope against my skin. I had to be subtle. He kept glancing at me, and any obvious attempt to free myself might enrage him. Eventually, he left the room again, locking the door from the outside. I heard him walk away, the sound of his footsteps growing fainter. Maybe he had to grab supplies or something. As soon as I was sure he was gone, I started working on the knots more aggressively. If I could just get my wrists free, I could maybe stand up with the chair still tied to my legs and use that as a weapon, or wedge it in the door to keep him out. My adrenaline kicked in, fueling me. The rope cut into my flesh, but little by little the knot shifted. I felt a rush of hope. Maybe I could do this. I don't know how long it took, but I finally managed to slide one hand free. My wrist felt slick, blood from the abrasions. The pain was excruciating, but I clamped my teeth down to keep quiet. My heart hammered with newfound determination. I was going to escape. There was no other option. With one hand free, I reached around to untie the other. My fingers fumbled in the darkness, but the knot had loosened, so it didn't take long to free my second hand. Next came the ropes around my ankles. I bit my lip to stifle a gasp when the rope grazed raw skin. Sweat dripped down my temple, cold and stinging. But at last I stood, adrenaline coursing through every limb. My legs were shaky, pins and needles shooting up from my feet as circulation returned. I fought the urge to collapse. Creeping to the door, I tried the knob. Locked, of course. I quietly felt along the edges of the frame, searching for a hinge or something to pry it with. My eyes had adjusted enough that I could see the faint outline of the door in the weak beam of moonlight from a tiny window near the ceiling. I spotted an old metal tool near the shelves, maybe a screwdriver or a chisel. I tiptoed across the room, grasping it in my sweaty palm. I was about to see if it could unscrew the hinges when I heard something that made my blood turn to ice. The distant sound of footsteps coming closer. Panicked, I looked around for a hiding spot. The room was mostly empty aside from shelves and debris. In a corner, there was a toppled cabinet tall enough for me to duck behind. I scurried over, crouched, and tried to control my breathing. I clenched the tool in my hand, prepared to swing if he discovered me. The door opened with a groan. The flashlight beam swept across the floor, illuminating the chair I'd been tied to. I heard Travis suck in a breath. "Sarah!" he called, his voice razor sharp. I stayed silent, fear pounding in my chest. The beam moved around the room. I could see it bouncing along the wall from my vantage point behind the cabinet. Then I heard him step in, letting the door swing shut behind him. The tension in the air was suffocating. I gripped the tool like my life depended on it. I heard him curse under his breath, then say, "You can't get far. The door's locked from the outside. There's nowhere to go." He paused as if waiting for me to reveal myself. My mind raced. If the door was locked from the outside, how did he come in? Maybe there was a second door or a different lock system. I didn't know, but I had a small advantage. For the moment, he didn't know exactly where I was. His footsteps echoed as he paced around, checking corners. I peeked through a gap in the cabinet. In the dim glow of his flashlight, I saw him pass by, holding something that looked like a hammer. My heart nearly stopped. If he found me, he'd have no qualms about using it. He circled around the far side of the room, sweeping the flashlight over the shelves. The beam nearly flicked across my hiding spot, but I ducked just in time. My lungs burned from holding my breath. Then he whispered, "Sarah, come out and maybe I'll go easy on you." The hammer scraped the floor as he dragged it menacingly, trying to rattle me. I forced myself to stay calm, to wait for an opportunity. He inched closer, and I realized I had to do something before he spotted me. Summoning every ounce of courage, I sprang up from behind the cabinet, brandishing the tool. He spun around, flashlight in one hand, hammer in the other, eyes blazing. I swung wildly, aiming for his face. He jerked to the side, and the tool glanced off his shoulder. He hissed in pain, stumbling backward. I didn't wait. I sprinted for the door, adrenaline fueling my every step, but the door didn't budge. I yanked the handle desperately. Travis recovered faster than I expected. He hurled himself at me, driving me against the door. My back slammed into the wood, pain flaring down my spine. We grappled, my arms flailing. I managed to elbow him in the ribs. He grunted. Momentarily loosening his grip, I wrenched free, turned, and jammed the metal tool into the door's lock with trembling hands. I had no idea if it would work, but I had to try. Over my shoulder, Travis advanced again. He swung the hammer. The edge caught my upper arm, a white-hot jolt of agony. I let out a scream, but kept twisting the tool in the lock. I felt something click, or maybe break, and then the handle turned. The door burst open, sending me stumbling into the hallway. I heard Travis cursing as he stumbled after me. The hallway was dark, and I had no flashlight. I ran blindly, my shoulder throbbing. I almost tripped over loose floorboards. The corridor twisted, leading me away from the main staircase we'd used earlier. I could hear Travis's footsteps behind me, along with his ragged breathing. My lungs were on fire. I thought, this is it. If I can't find a way out, he'll kill me. Then, to my right, I saw a faint outline of what might be a back entrance. I lunged for it, groping for a handle or a knob. My fingers found a rusted latch. I tugged. It gave an inch, then jammed. Behind me, Travis was closing in. In a frenzy, I slammed my shoulder into the door. Pain exploded through my entire arm, but the wood cracked. One more desperate shove, and the door gave way, splintering open onto a small porch. I half fell outside into the cold night air. Gasping, I scrambled to my feet. The yard was overgrown, and the moon was hidden behind clouds, but it was enough light to see a path leading around the side of the house. I took off at a full sprint, ignoring the stabbing pain in my shoulder. Behind me, Travis roared, cursing. I heard him crash through the busted door. Terror propelled me forward. My foot caught on a root and I nearly face-planted. I forced myself up again, spitting dirt, and kept running. At the edge of the property, I saw the faint glint of Travis's SUV, but I didn't bother with it. I had no idea where he kept the keys. I dashed onto the gravel driveway, aiming for the dark road that led to the main highway. My bare hands scratched at briars and low-hanging branches, but I barely felt the pain. Adrenaline overshadowing everything. For a moment, the night was silent except for my labored breathing. Maybe he wasn't chasing me anymore, or maybe he was just a few steps behind, waiting to strike. Eventually, I reached the main road, panting so hard I felt dizzy. No cars passed by. The nearest neighbor could be miles away. I wanted to scream for help, but my throat was too raw. I stumbled along the road, forcing myself forward. After what felt like an eternity, I saw headlights in the distance. Summoning the last scrap of strength I had, I waved my arms frantically. The car slowed, then stopped. I practically collapsed at the driver's side door, sobbing that I needed help. The driver, an older woman, looked startled and terrified. She let me in, locked the doors, and immediately called 911. She kept asking me what happened, but all I could do was cry and mumble about being attacked. She turned the car around and drove me to the nearest gas station, where we waited for the police to arrive. They eventually took my statement, got an ambulance to treat my injuries. I told them everything. How I met Travis, what he did, where it happened. They went out to the property. By the time they searched it, he was gone. Some of the rope was still there, along with signs of a struggle, my blood on the floor. But Travis had vanished. They checked the name. Travis, but the app profile was scrubbed. Probably a fake. The SUV wasn't registered under his name. Everything he told me was a carefully constructed lie. In the aftermath, I stayed with a friend because I couldn't handle sleeping alone in my apartment. I'd jolt awake at every sound, convinced he'd found me. My arms took weeks to heal, and I still have scars around my wrists from the rope burns. The police have an open case, but they've made no progress in finding him. People keep telling me it's not my fault, that I shouldn't blame myself for trusting him. But of course I do. I keep replaying each choice I made. Meeting him at night, going to that house, not telling anyone where I was going. Nowadays, I barely check my dating apps, and I've moved to a new neighborhood. I changed my phone number too. Part of me is certain he's still out there. I sometimes think I see him in the crowd or driving past me on the street. But maybe that's my paranoia talking. Still, I'd rather be paranoid than caught off guard again. I wish I could say I found closure, but I haven't. What I found is fear. Of trusting people, of letting them in, of ignoring the subtle alarm bells that might ring in the back of my mind. I can't go anywhere secluded without my heart pounding like a drum. Maybe someday I'll heal. But for now, I'm just grateful to be alive. So that's my story. I'm sharing it in hopes it reaches someone who might be on the fence about going somewhere remote on a first date. Please, don't make the same mistake I did. Let friends know where you're going, meet in public places, trust your gut if something feels off. If even one person reads this and decides to be more cautious, maybe I won't feel like it was all for nothing. I'm still here, and I plan to stay that way. If Travis is out there somewhere, lurking, I want him to know. He didn't break me. I'm scarred, sure, but not broken. And one day, I hope they catch him. Until then, I'll keep sharing my story, hoping it can be a warning to everyone who thinks real evil can't be hiding behind a friendly smile. Because I've learned it definitely can, and by the time you realize, it might be too late.